Welcome to Growing a B2B SaaS. On this show, you'll get actionable and usable advice. You'll hear about all aspects of growing a business to a business software company. Customer success, sales, funding, bootstrapping, exits, scaling, everything you need to know about growing a startup, and you'll get it from someone who's going through the same journey. Now your host, Joran Hoffman.
Welcome back to the Grow Your B2B SaaS podcast. Our goal is to help other B2B SaaS founders to grow by giving them all the insights they need from industry experts. In Season 1, Episode 8, we chatted with Alexander Teuma about how to grow a network, and we also discussed a little bit on how to grow a community. Today, we're going to dive deeper on how to build a community for a B2B SaaS company. We're going to do this with Mike Rizzo. I learned a new title, as Mike is a community-led founder at Marketingops, a community for marketing operation professionals. Next to this, Mike is a community-led growth advisor at Rev Brains. Let's just get this conversation going. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. Always happy to talk shop about community and marketing ops. It's always a pleasure. And the last time you and I chatted, we got pretty nerdy pretty fast. So I'm sure this will be interesting, hopefully for your listeners too.
I think it's going to be exactly the same thing today. As you mentioned, we already chatted, so I know why should people listen to you. But if I just ask you a really Dutch blunt question, why should people listen to you today?
I hope that you find what I have to share insightful. I've been on a journey building a community-led platform for marketing operations professionals for a couple of years now. So I've learned a few things about what it takes to build a community of practice. So that is what we are, right? As a community of practice. But I've also learned a thing or two about what it takes to build a customer advisory board and a customer community as well, since I did that in a past role. But ultimately, I'm a marketing technologist along the way. So I tend to think a lot about scalability and creating programs that hopefully are not bespoke one-off efforts, right? So, maybe that's why you should listen.
Nice. No, that's a definitely good reason. You have community-led growth advisor, community-led founder. I think it's a new term for many people listening. Like, what in your words does community-led mean?
For me, community-led is all about really being very intentional at asking for ongoing feedback from your constituents. In our case, it's a group of professionals that practice marketing operations. But in some other cases, you may have customers that fit into a certain target demographic or audience or user type. So depending on how you slice up your sort of community and the intention of your community, whether that's persona-based or role-based, if you're a SaaS business, right? Think about admins versus non-admins or marketers versus sales reps. I can see a world where you want to communicate pretty differently to those folks. And they're going to have very different needs, right? And they're going to want to have very different conversations. And for me, community-led means creating a space to allow those different types of professionals, those different types of customers or users to share their desires and what their pains are. And you may or may not be able to solve those, right? It might not be within the scope of your SaaS product to solve that problem, but it's good to help them figure out how to potentially go solve that. I think we're seeing a lot of this in the market right now. There's a big motion around nearbound and partnerships and this whole idea of an ecosystem, right? Referrals and references and partners. Yeah, your product can't solve everything, but I'll bet you someone that you work with, that you partner with closely, might actually be able to help. Community-led is about creating the space to be able to hear that and then support them.
You mentioned two really interesting things, like asking for feedback, right? So people can really engage with you within the community, but also segmenting like the actual community. So based on, for example, as you mentioned, job titles, which is, of course, really important because the marketing person is going to have something different than the sales guy.
Yeah, that's a pretty basic way to think about it is job title, segmentation. When I was at MavenLink, now Cantata, when we thought about building our customer advisory board, which of course is a very intentional small group, right, of community members and users, there were probably like 5 different permutations of how we might architect that board. It might have been by industry vertical. It could have been by the type of company that they were, like company size. It could have been on the plans that they were using, right? There was 3 different tiers of the software. And so like maybe we pull a board together for each tier, but being intentional about who it is that you're going to speak to and identifying what it is that you're building Whether that's in a small customer advisory board and a large community, that's really important. You need to be super intentional about who it's for and why you're trying to pull them together.
In every podcast episode, it comes back your ICP, your ideal customer profile. So if you actually know who you're building it for, then most likely getting that customer advisory board together is going to be a lot easier because you know exactly who you're actually building your SaaS for.
Yeah, I would say if you're lucky enough, not every company knows who they're building for yet. And I think that's the important part of community-led. Right? Just to circle back on that topic, community-led isn't about necessarily who you've pulled together because you think that's your ideal customer or you believe that's your ICP. You should allow the community to guide you on what your ICP should be. And that is community-led. Like you can lean in on what you believe is a problem set and find out very quickly that it's not that big of a problem for them. And so I think it's a give and take of, look, we're going to pull together the folks that we believe are our ICP in some sort of community orientation or customer advisory board, but we also want them to give us directionality on, are we solving the right problems for them? And do we need to think about adjacent sort of use cases or industries or whatever it is, and make sure that community can lead you in a direction of providing value.
Yeah, that's interesting because like my assumption was you need to get your ICP really clear and then you start building community, but you say, okay, you don't have to have that right now. Maybe then a question as in what needs to be in place or what needs to happen first before you really can start thinking about community-led growth?
Yeah, you need to have a perspective or an opinion. You need to have a hypothesis, I think is probably the better term for it. I often think of community building, customer advisory board building, and heck, marketing operations as a category akin to being a product manager. Right. So when you're a product manager at a B2B SaaS company, or really any company for that matter, you have a hypothesis, you have a theory, maybe there was a bug that was reported or there's a gap in the market, and you start to do user research right away. And so a community at scale is massive amounts of user research, whether they're your current customers or not. And so in order to get started is you have a general hypothesis of a problem that you'd like to solve. And then you go to market and you try to validate, is this really a problem or not? By pulling together what you believe is the right group or constituents, community members, et cetera, to validate if you're headed the right direction. And you'll really quickly start to learn whether or not you're headed down the right path, and you can pivot and adjust from there. That's a common mistake that a lot of folks make, right? I'm going to say, pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Of course, we don't pick up the phone anymore, but just start talking to people about this stuff. It doesn't need to be perfectly baked. Like you don't need to know your exact ideal customer profile in order to start a community. What you need is a hypothesis. And then you just need to start talking to people.
Yeah. And I think like we did a summary episode of all the advice the industry experts gave of season 1. And the big thing was talk to your customers, talk to your customers, talk to your customers. And in your case, you're actually saying, if you want to build up the community, you need to start testing your hypothesis. So you need to start not just talking to your customers, but also the people out there and then just test things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We want to validate that the problems that we want to solve or that we think we want to solve are the right ones to be solving for a particular set of folks, or we might find out that it's a different group. And then as a business or as an organization, product team, you name it, you can make a decision on, okay, maybe that wasn't the right group. The TAM's not large enough, right?
Yeah, and for people who don't know what TAM is the total addressable market. Well, how big is the market you're going after? So that is definitely a good one to always remember when you start building a SaaS at the beginning. You mentioned, I guess, like already indeed one common mistake. So not talking enough, I guess, to the prospects or people out there. Any other common mistakes companies make?
Yeah, I think it's weaving back and forth between not having an identity for your community, depending on what you're building, right? If you are building a user community, that is a very different intention. And it's like, why? What did you pull them together for? Is it an innovation-based play where you're trying to get ideas to make your product better? Is it a group of folks that you want to hopefully gain as influencers, right? For your audience, right? Those are potentially a different mix. They may be users, but they might not use your product that often. And so they're not really that helpful for an innovation perspective. But if you think about, oh, we need to understand the trends that are going on in our industry, you may want to pull in folks that are adjacent to your customer base or could potentially be customers one day, or are your customers, but they're not your day in, day out user. They're closer to the problems that are happening in the industry. And that's a very different type of group that you're pulling together. And so when you go back and forth between the idea of what type of community you are and the intentionality of it, is this meant to support our customers? Is it meant for innovation? Like, you just need to stick with one thing and start. I always say aim small, miss small, and keep that focus for your community members so they know what the purpose of the community is. Adjacent to that and along the same lines is this idea of, is the community your community from your brand, or is it something that you're doing as a bigger motion in the market? Inbound is a great example of that. Right. Inbound created a community of marketing experts, right? Over time, they educated the market on a new methodology and they pulled people together around the concept of inbound. Now, inbound, of course, was popularized by HubSpot, but they did a really nice job of balancing the load between there's just inbound and then there's HubSpot, the product. And I think they wove that narrative into their brand ethos in a really healthy way. But if you go back and forth between trying to act like it's not a part of your brand, but it is, then you leave a sour taste in your community users' mouths, so to speak. Just don't tiptoe around it. Either let it be your brand's community or let it be its own thing, but try to be really intentional about how that that message weaves into your brand narrative.
Yeah, that makes sense. And comes back to what you said at the beginning, right? Not having an identity. So make sure that you know exactly what the goal is. And a couple of other interesting things you said, as in, I think a lot of people, including myself, sometimes just think building a community is indeed user-based. So you're going to think about, okay, we're going to create a community of our users, maybe even turn it into a customer advisory board or somewhat. And then that's going to be our user base. But I think one thing you said, trends within the market, those are your more maybe ideal clients, or they know exactly what's happening. That could be a really good one as well. So they don't have to be in your user base right now, but maybe later on.
Yeah, exactly right. I think it's always a great idea to explore, should we pull in experts that are in our field that could potentially help influence the direction of where we're going next. And it's okay that they're not our customers. In fact, it's even better that they're not currently using our product today, because now we are trying to understand what their challenges are and maybe why they're using some other solution or no solution. They chose spreadsheets over some other thing. It really helps expand your ability to understand the market and sort of the challenges that are faced there.
Yeah, makes sense. I think everybody is stressed for time, right? We ourselves as well. We were just making jokes of it, busy times. So we just made time for the podcast. But making time for or engaging in a community is, I guess, another thing. If you have to start from scratch, so you have to build a community for a B2B SaaS company, what would be your approach? And why should people join it from their perspective, as in what's in it for them?
Yeah, again, I'm going to go back to, it depends on what your purpose of the community is all about. There's a acronym popularized by a group called CMX. It's a model, really, a framework. It's called SPACES. And that SPACES model is meant to help you try to make a decision on what the intention of your community is for, and maybe how you would try to measure its success. So there would be a product-oriented sort of community. And so this is product innovation, ideation, those kinds of things. The S in SPACES is support. And so this is really a place where it's this is a knowledge base. This is a place where you can submit tickets. This is a place where other community members can come in and answer those queries that are coming in from your other customers. And so the intention of that, of course, is to potentially reduce the load of your support staff. And you might measure that through the interactions of the way that they search through your knowledge base and the views of the articles and the number of answers that are coming in from other customers. And so depending on what you're building, that's how you then go motivate different users. And again, if you're using a proper community forum type of platform, you may find the features and functionality in that particular environment lend themselves nicely to gamification and celebration of those that are involved. And so someone may want to get involved as I'm sure we've all seen in things like Reddits and you name it, right? There's a reward system, right? And so if you have built an environment that says, hey, you're a champion, you're the number one respondent on all of these different things, we see it really well in the HubSpot support channels, right? Like they get these really fancy badges for being the best, most supportive sort of partner in the thing or whatever. Those are motivating factors for a lot of people to participate. And I think if you focus in on, again, the intention of why the community is being built and what you're doing it for, then you're going to be able to motivate people to get involved in a number of different ways. One of the things that I find really exciting as an opportunity that I didn't really have a chance to fully try to implement is this idea of, in a customer-oriented community that is maybe support-focused, to try to reduce the costs of your support staff and really help each other out, learn the product, innovate, those kinds of things. There's actually a really great opportunity to pull in your tangential pieces of the extended community, so to speak. And what I mean by that is think about your partner channel. And so if you were actually to say, hey, here's what it's like when you become like a tier 1 partner, we're actually going to showcase you as like the partner that is going to be there answering the hardest questions in the community for the next 3 weeks. And every single one of them, we want you to be there answering those questions. It gives you great visibility into you being an expert at this particular product. So imagine like an ISV, right? Partner for Salesforce. They get to be on a pedestal for a day, like, being celebrated as experts in their field. That's really cool. So you want to think about different ways to take what you've done with the community and allow other parts of your business to participate in a healthy manner. So it's a rising tide. I never had a chance to do that when I was at Maven Lake. But I think for those that tune into this and are building community, like start thinking outside of the box of like just who it's specifically for and how to go activate other parts of the business to support that same initiative.
Yeah, and I think that's really clever because in the end, the partner is going to share their knowledge, they're going to share their information. So in the end, they're going to get something out of it in the long run as well. If you keep sharing your knowledge, keep sharing your value, then it's almost like a lead generator for them, but you're still sticking them to your product because they know a lot about your product.
Yeah, exactly. And the community gets a ton of value because they're like, man, I've got this burning question that I really need help with. It's, I know that there's going to be somebody on the other end during this week to answer that question. So I'm going to do it this day.
We'll add the framework, a link to the framework within the show notes so people can check it out.
Yeah. They're each of them. You really do have to dive in. It's a great framework, but you do have to dive in each time to try to decide what are we trying to do here. And I think it's a wonderful jumping off point. The one thing I will say that's tied to the questions that you've been asking me is just because you have a framework to follow doesn't mean they're going to be success. Like you absolutely need to have somebody be responsible for this function. And there's a difference between somebody who's running the community like a product and then somebody who's like a community manager, for example, or a moderator. There are wildly different things that they need to pay attention to. And you should think about this investment very seriously because it takes people. Just like MarTech takes people to run the technology, aka marketing operations professionals, community takes people beyond anything else.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think it's going to tie really well into the next question because I think when you don't have somebody responsible for the community, you're definitely going to face a lot of challenges. That's probably like a common mistake, right? To not have somebody responsible because then nothing probably is going to happen. Any other like challenges or obstacles you face while building up a community? Because not everything is going to be probably rainbows and sunshine, I guess. What happened to you and how did you overcome those?
Definitely not all rainbows and sunshine. Yeah, it's getting comfortable. In my case, it was, again, we are a community-led platform for these professionals. We're a community of practice, and we're instituting guidelines and best practices for how to be involved in the community. I personally had to get really comfortable with enforcing those different things and realizing that it's my responsibility to protect everybody else. And so if we see bad behavior, if we see someone like coming in that really shouldn't be there, we have to take that action and doing that in a way that's delicate, right? Learning that slight nuance of, hey, you've done something that doesn't adhere to our guidelines. You need to be aware of it. This is your warning, and we may have to take action in the future. But getting yourself comfortable as the owner of that community, the moderator, the manager, and realizing that's actually like the reason why your community might actually be successful is that you are sticking to what you say, right? It doesn't become unwieldy. And I think my hard lesson learned is making sure I got comfortable with that as quickly as possible. And then reinforcing it, finding those mechanics to constantly reinforce that. Maybe that means once a month or once a quarter, we go remind our community members, these are our guidelines. If you don't follow them, be aware. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I can even relate to that a little bit already. I'm not in that many communities just because no time at the moment. And like I do think if you're in, you have to indeed put the time in as well. But for example, one we have where I am in, where I'm not actually doing that much, but it's the product hunt launch group I'm in. And they have really clear guidelines. Like you can't promote anything yourself. It has to go to follow certain procedures. Like they have guidelines for it. If somebody's going to do it, it's going to be banned. Like they're going to be kicked out, things like that. So it's really nice that you know exactly what is happening when something happens. So if people try to scam the community, you're the one protecting it. And that can be in any way, of course. So they know at least what the quality of the content is going to be pushed in the community as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. We build spaces in our particular community to allow for a little bit of flexibility. It's okay that you like, especially in a world of marketing and marketing operations, like people want to talk about what they're doing, right? Like it's pretty natural. We're like part of a marketing team. I just created a space that's called Shameless Plug. That's what that's for, right? If you did something awesome, you are promoting a product, you got interviewed on a podcast, whatever, go promote it and celebrate that, but put it in the Shameless Plug channel because everything else is meant to be around discussion around career growth or a particular technology or whatever. But there's a dedicated space for this, right? Don't go like shamelessly plugging all of your stuff everywhere constantly.
Exactly. Do it in the appropriate channels. Like, that's why they're there.
Growing a B2B SaaS is tough. We know. This is why we started Redditus. We help you to grow your monthly recurring revenue without high upfront costs. How? By leveraging someone else's network and only giving away a commission when they deliver you a paid client. It's called affiliate marketing. It's already a really cost-effective and scalable revenue channel. We even made it better for you. With Redditus, you can start for free and only start paying us when you generate revenue. Learn more at www.getredditus.com.
I know you're going to actually organize a physical event in November. Like I think most of the communities, especially nowadays, are online and you're actually going to bring them offline. Can you tell a bit more about the decision and maybe you can also tell a bit more about the event and how you're going to bring the online towards offline?
Yeah, totally. No, I appreciate the recognition of what we're doing. So we've actually run 2 years running. We've done summer camp. And what that is a 50-person networking event for 2.5 days. And it's deep learning. It's 50 people in a room, hour-long discussion leader takes us through a presentation, and a whole group is contributing in the discussion on how can we learn from each other, guided by a presenter, right? And so there's often about 10 to 12 presenters over those 2.5 days. And that is so well received because it's just you get to lock yourself out of the world of the noise, right? Our busy schedules, and really focus in on trying to learn from others in the space. And so we said, how do we 10x that? If there were 50 people at this thing, how do we get 500 people to have as close to a similar experience as possible? And so that's what we're doing at our event in November. It is called Mopsapalooza. Despite the name, it is actually meant to bring together folks from all different RevOps and go-to-market operations backgrounds. And that's the whole point, right? Like it's a festival of learning in the category of marketing and revenue operations, nay, go-to-market operations, if you prefer that term. And ultimately, we're bringing together 500 folks to say, you are learning. It is a community-led event. There are no vendors on stage that got to pay to speak, right? No, none of our sponsors got to pay to speak. Instead, we picked all of the content that we thought would be the best for the community, pitched by the community members themselves. And we said, great, this is our lineup. And so we're really excited about that. And I think it's really important to try to bridge the online world to the offline world because there's just no replacing what it's like to connect with people. Like, we all were quarantined for a couple of years and we got used to this online world we live in. But I'll tell you what, getting back to hanging out with people and learning from them in real conversations and getting nerdy over a coffee or name your beverage of choice, there's nothing that replaces that. We're really excited. But I will say we are doing a hybrid event, so we're not exactly leaving all the virtual folks alone. And the hybrid activation is like an outsized value. Like we're basically saying, hey, you get to stream like 15 sessions from the in-person event. You get over 15 pre-recorded sessions, and then you get access to all of the recorded content from the in-person event beyond what was streamed to you. That virtual experience is going to be pretty well worth it for folks. So we're still recognizing that not everybody can make it, right? And we still want you to have access to that content.
Yeah, I think that's really nice, making it hybrid. But I do agree on you, as in, like, you can't build relationships always online fully, and definitely bring things offline. Maybe to give an example for myself, as in, I'm in the SaaS Talk founder membership group. It's also an online community, but we also meet physically offline. Sometimes even before, like now, the SaaS Talk event, there's one day which is purely focused on the community. You get to indeed have a drink with the person, either it's a tea, coffee, or beer. But at least you can look somebody in the eye. You can go real nerdy, like pretty quickly, and then you can get to know somebody. And once going back online, you know how somebody is, and that's just helping to, as you mentioned, like deeper the relationships.
Yeah, it's a shared experience too. You were both in one place physically at one time, right? Like you both saw that thing happen. The crazy person that ran down with their crazy outfit on, or whatever. Someone like gave this wonderful presentation, and you got to hear the questions firsthand and then talk on the side of side. There's just nothing.
Indeed, if you have that, it's just easier to also get somebody's advice or just ask him to help you out. Like I had a lot of the people in the community already come on the podcast because it's really easy to reach out, and then they're more than happy to share their knowledge.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing about running community in general, is like people are willing to share, like they really want to. But again, finding that time and that space to do that is hard. We're all busy. And so when you can set aside that time, that event space, that physical presence, that forces that behavior. And I don't remember ever attending a virtual event where I wasn't like triple working. I'm listening to the event, I'm answering this thing, I'm going back to the community, I'm talking on Slack. I'm very multitasking.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. And at one point, I just think, oh, I'm just going to leave the event because I'm just working anyway. And then I just get distracted by the event.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I heard something interesting. I really need to finish this task. I'm just going to go ahead and shut the event down. I get it. I get that people are busy, but I hope that I do go back and watch my content that I have access to, but not everybody does. So.
Yeah, makes sense. So we are coming to the final questions, and which are basically advice per stage. When we talk about building a community, like what kind of advice would you give somebody, a SaaS founder who is just starting out and trying to grow to 10K monthly recurring revenue?
I would say start with a very small group in that sort of initial batch of community efforts, right? Focus in on what you believe are your sort of industry experts or your potential customers or even your early beta testers, and treat them as special members, right? Make sure that they get recognized for the value that they're bringing to you. Whether you as a founder decide to set aside some sort of options that they can exercise because you issue them 10 shares for being a member of a vesting period of a couple years, or you tell them they're going to get grandfathered into some sort of product, but just make sure you recognize the value that they're bringing and keep it small at first, because running a community, as I said, of any size, whether it's a customer advisory board or a larger scale, it does take time and it does take dedication. And you don't really want to be distracted and let people feel like they're not being heard or paid attention to. Keep it small at first, unless you have the budget to be able to hire somebody as a community manager. And even then, make sure that they're focused very intently on providing value to them just as much as that group is providing value to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense.
By the way, don't forget to ask them what value is to them. It's okay if you don't have the answer, right?
Yeah.
What could I give you in exchange for your time? And sometimes people will be like, nothing. Sometimes they'll be like, give me 1% of your company. You're like, get out of here.
Yeah, but at least ask them. And that's the beauty with the community, right? You can ask them anything. If you get them in the community, you can basically ask them anything. Or before, you can just ask, indeed, what do you want in return, or what is value to you?
Yeah. community led, right?
Nice. When we go past the 10K monthly recurring revenue, and this is a big jump, when we go towards 10 million ARR, what kind of advice would you give SaaS founders here?
Yeah, I would say start leaning in on what is the staff requirement, the people manager side of it look like for managing any type of the community that we talked about during this show, right? Whether that's product, innovation, content, whatever it is, make sure that you look at the headcounts that you're going to need in order to run those effectively. And then make sure you are investing in the right sort of technologies. But I don't mean just pick a forum product or whatever. There isn't a right or wrong way to do. There's probably a wrong way, but there isn't the perfect solution for any one of your initiatives. I would say just make sure you have somebody involved that can try to take what is going to come from this community effort and tie that back into the business, right? Their mission shouldn't just be that you have a successful community for whatever its purpose is. It should also be, how do we communicate that value back into the partner channel, back into marketing, back into customer success, back into support or sales or product or wherever it needs to go. Make sure that data can flow back to those other key stakeholders in your business and really invest in that motion, right? Community often sits on an island. And so try to make it more a part of the business and have it roll into some portion of the business. Ideally, not marketing. I come from marketing. I get it. You want to use it, but marketers, inevitably their KPIs are all about pipeline and leads and all that other stuff. I think when a community is built for the intention of driving more revenue, you're probably missing the point. And so maybe have it roll into a different org with some different KPIs, but don't forget to pass back some information when the opportunity is right. If you see a problem that a customer has in the community, I think it's okay to communicate that back over to the marketing and sales and customer success team for whatever cross-sell, upsell motion you want to try to go after. But that's not the purpose of the community.
Nice. You said don't put it in marketing, don't put it somewhere else in the org. If I'm going to maybe ask a tough question and maybe it's hard to answer, but if you have to put it in one department, which one would that be?
It really depends. I do like it rolling into product or customer success, as long as the customer success angle has the support arm to it, right? Not so much the customer success is really just a channel to do cross-sell, upsell. It's when you could attach yourself to the CS side of the business that is adoption, value, that piece of it, right? Because don't get me wrong, at some point, your client success team should, in theory, be responsible for more revenue on the books than net new pipeline. That's your ideal, right? Ideally, you go from net new pipeline is everything that we need to great, we have it, now we need to retain it. And the cross-sell, upsell motion is actually more revenue each year than the net new pipeline. That's where you want to go. But don't lose, if you do attach a community to the client success org, don't lose line of sight on this is not a way to try to find just pure revenue opportunities. So you can play a dangerous game there, but I do think it orients itself nicely to that sort of division. And products may really appreciate it being there too, but I probably lean more on client success.
Makes sense. And in the end, coming back to the exact beginning of the conversation, make sure you have a goal set for your community. So give it an identity and then put it in the right org, which probably is indeed CS in my opinion as well.
Yeah.
One final question. What is the one thing you wish you knew 10 years ago?
Oh, the one thing I wish I knew 10 years ago. I wish I knew how much what I would call the marketecture can be adapted and adopted to the needs of the business, not in a haphazardly way. 10 years ago, we were almost trying to solve these one-off point solution problems and stuff. And I wish I would have, or I guess it just takes time to learn this, right? As your career develops. The knowledge I have now about being able to see the bigger picture of how you can orchestrate the information and the sort of the data that comes into your business and how that could support all these other motions. I wish I saw a little bit of that 10 years ago, but I don't know that we were all there yet either. As technology providers, certainly not my skill level yet. I didn't have enough exposure, but I'd say, gosh, yeah, there's usually something bigger to be able to go after when you're looking across all these tools that you're using, and how does that actually enable your go-to-market function?
Nice. Nice, makes sense. Cool. If people want to get in contact with you, Mike, how would they do so?
I am Mike at marketingops.com. If you want to email me and have any questions, I'm also Mike D as in David, Rizzo, Rizzo. And you can find me on LinkedIn if you do the /n/Mike D Rizzo. That would probably be the place where I'm most active, to be honest with you, outside of course, the MoPros community. So come join us for free in Slack. If you're a marketing operations or revenue operations professional, please don't come in if you're anybody else.
Nice. Indeed. Stick to the ICP of the community. We're going to link to your LinkedIn profile. We're going to link also towards a link of the Spaces framework. We're going to link to the event of the name, which is really hard to remember. So say it one more time.
Mopsapalooza, November 5 through 8 in Anaheim, California, right behind Disneyland.
Nice. For all RevOps people, check it out. Cool. Thanks again for coming on the show, Mike.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. And I really appreciate you having me. And hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Definitely we will. Thanks.
You've been listening to Growing a B2B SaaS. Joran has been ahead of customer success before founding his own startup. He's experiencing the same journey you are. We hope you've gotten some actionable advice from the show. And we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. Make sure to like, rate, and review the podcast in the meantime. To find out more and to hook up with us on our social media sites, go to www.getredditus.com. See you next time on Growing a B2B SaaS.